Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this session. I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then she will take it away. Okay, welcome to 2021 Sunstone Symposium Session 363, How Ex-Mormonism Replicates Mormonism. At Sunstone, we are making it a goal to build a community that allows many ways for people to express their faith. Our tagline is, "There is more than one way to Mormon." And we invite you to help us build a community where all paths are given space to be better understood. Please support us in our mission by making a donation and subscribing at sunstone.org. After the symposium, Sunstone will edit, polish, and re-upload this week's session videos to the Whova app, and that'll take about 2 weeks before those are live, and they will be on there all of 2021. Please type any questions for those who are attending online into the Whova app to be addressed during the Q&A, or if you're watching in person, we'll open up the audience mic for questions at the end, right down here. Okay, about this presentation. Ex-Mormons are replicating Mormonism in many ways. Male authority is still dominant, as is the Mormon vision of repentance and change, along with trying to perfect our way into godhood. The same sexist, heteronormative, binary way of seeing the world clings on. We are trying to pretend we're not Mormon, but all the patterns remain. And then our presenter today is Mette Ivie Harrison, and she is a national best-selling author in The Bishop's Wife, used to write frequently about Mormonism on RNS, Medium, and Huffington, and has gone quiet of late in the midst of a divorce. Mette is a Princeton PhD and a nationally ranked triathlete. How exciting. She is the mother of 6 children, 5 living, and I was going to turn the time over to her. That's very Mormon of me, but she'll take the floor.
And I'm going to start in the most Mormon way possible. My best friend from high school was visiting me the last couple of days, and I told her how I was going to start this talk, and she was like, "No, don't do it." I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to apologize for this talk. I wish that I had had time to have some nice visuals for my talk. There should be some photos. There are not photos. That is because I am working 100 hours a week to try to survive, because I was a super Mormon mom, and I got a Princeton PhD when I was 25, and then I stayed home for 25 years with my kids. I thought that I'd done everything right. I thought I had a good backup plan. I thought, I can go back and teach school, and I was a writer on the side. It turned out none of those actually turned out to be good backup plans. So I'm working 100-hour weeks at a job that I'm really, really glad to have, but does not pay me very well. So that is why, and also the bishop asked me to give this talk. So I looked up ex-Mormonism in the dictionary, and this is what it says. Okay. So my friend and I were chatting actually just before this. We went out to lunch, and I was talking to her about some thoughts about my future, and she said, there's more than 2 choices. There's more than this binary. And I said to her, that is exactly what I'm going to talk about. I am struggling not to think of the world in binary choices. And I'm not saying like Mormons are the only humans on the planet that think in binaries. I'm sure we're not. But the force is strong with this one, right? So I'm going to try this year to do a little better job than I did last year, apparently, at trying to explain that when I am talking about ex-Mormonism replicating Mormonism, I'm not trying to point a finger at you. I am pointing a finger at me. This is what I recognize in myself. Now, if you think you have seen it and that this is useful to you, great. Otherwise, that's fine. I'm not trying to make everybody feel bad. There is sexism, but all right, continue. So I feel like I am deeply Mormon. I am ex-Mormon. I don't attend Mormon church. I don't believe in the authority of the church. And yet, I love the Book of Mormon. If you don't know this already, I write Book of Mormon fan fiction I love it. I have a book called The Women's Book of Mormon, which is all the same stories that you already know from the Book of Mormon, but told with women characters, plus some extra stories thrown in. And somebody said to me yesterday as I walked out of my class, like, I love your fiction about the Book of Mormon. I was like, fiction? This is revelation from God. I don't know what you're talking about. It's the same kind of revelation Joseph Smith got. I sometimes wish that I was neither Mormon or ex-Mormon. I put a tweet out a couple weeks ago saying, fight me, ex-Mormon is a subcategory of Mormon. And surprisingly, that went viral. There are a lot of people who had things to say about it. And there are a group of Mormons who are like, yes, ex-Mormons are still Mormon. And there are a group of ex-Mormons who feel like that's true. And then there are a group of ex-Mormons who are like, no, we're definitely not Mormon. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not Mormon anymore. So, again, remember, this is me talking about me and my experience of being an ex-Mormon. How long have I been ex-Mormon? I don't know how to even describe that. I had a faith crisis in 2005 after the death of my youngest daughter. And that was when I became an atheist. But I kept attending church because, of course, why would you not attend the Mormon church? That's where the truth is. Like, this dichotomy was something I held within me for a long time. I did finally stop attending in January of 2019. And one of the things that's funny to me is when people talk about people stepping away from the church, and this is both Mormons and ex-Mormons, they often talk about like a slide. Like, you gradually stop attending. That was not what happened to me. I had been attending every single week. I had a calling. I taught the 3-year-olds in primary, and let me tell you, I was the best goddamn Sunday teacher they had ever had in that class. And I had to go and tell the primary presidency, I'm not coming back in January. That was an opportune moment for me to tell them I'm not returning. And they begged me to stay. I was like, have you seen the new Come Follow Me manuals? I am not teaching that to 3-year-olds. And they're like, you could use the old manual. By the way, the old Sunbeam manual is fabulous. There's a lesson on I have 2 hands. What 3-year-old does not want to hear about I have 2 hands? Those were good lessons. But the Come Follow Me manual was march around the room with a picture of Joseph Smith held in front of you and sing Follow the Prophet. I was not going to do that. So I very abruptly stopped attending church. I taught my class even after I told them that I was leaving. I taught the class because that was my obligation. Am I Mormon? Am I ex-Mormon? I don't know. So I taught my class. Then when January came along and they had the changeover to the new teacher, I didn't teach my class anymore. And I made a goal for myself. My New Year's resolutions were to stop wearing my garments and go buy some underwear, and to try a drink of coffee, because I'd never done those things before. And again, it was not a slide. It was a decision, a conscious decision that I made. I could no longer attend. I was tired of being the only person in my ward who wore a rainbow ribbon to church every day, and I was tired of wearing black to church. I wore black to church every Sunday since the policy, the POX in 2015, because I was in mourning for our church. I felt like our church had died. The church that I grew up in and that I believe in was dead. And that was my way of expressing it. Let me tell you that when I thought that what I was doing by wearing a rainbow ribbon was, showing myself to be a safe person, that was a lie that I told myself. What I was actually doing was marking myself as an unsafe person. And as a result of that, over the next several years, I became gradually more and more separated from the rest of the ward, from people who did not want to speak to me. Okay. There's an error there in my spelling. Okay. So, now each of these slides does not have any photos, as I spoke about before, but maybe they'll be useful to you. These are just general topics of things that I see ex-Mormons doing that I feel like are very Mormon. Again, let me just say, this is what I am doing. Maybe you have moved past this. I don't know, but I see a lot of ex-Mormons doing the same thing as me. So, I see a lot of rescuing going on. So perhaps you might see that there is a new dynamic of saviors within ex-Mormonism and people who are to be saved. Now, as often happens when within ex-Mormonism, everything gets flip-flopped. So everything that was good before when you were a Mormon is now bad, and everything that was bad before is now good. So you are now the rescuer of all of the Mormons who are, of course, have gone astray or are evil, and you need to convert them to the new true way of life. So if you haven't seen this dynamic before, I will talk more about it because a lot of these slides have a relationship to this. So here's my question for you. Why do you need to rescue people? Because I think that need to rescue people comes from growing up Mormon. And I think it comes from growing up with this idea that you are here on this earth because God sent you here and you have a mission. And when you step away from Mormonism, there's a giant gulf inside of your identity and your need to interact with other people that used to be filled by rescuing them and saving people. And so, for many of us, without considering it very carefully, we fill that giant hole inside of ourselves by continuing to rescue people, but just flip-flopping everything. So here again, some more questions. Who are the people you're saving? Generally, they're Mormons, but not always. Sometimes you might be saving other people. Sometimes we, as ex-Mormons, are trying to save all religious people. Everybody who's religious is deluded, and we have to save them all. Sometimes we are saving a small group of people. Sometimes we're saving LGBT people. Sometimes we're saving women who are still attached to the church. But there's a lot of saving going on. Why are we trying to save them? Do we think that they cannot make decisions in their own life? Again, this feels like a very Mormon thing. If you did not go on a Mormon mission, and I did not, I nonetheless learned that what missionaries do, and when people talk about being a missionary, a member missionary, what they mean is seeing other people as people who are making bad choices and that you have to go rescue them from the choices in their life because sadly God has not chosen to speak to them and tell them what they should do with their life except through you because you know the truth. Again, does this sound familiar within ex-Mormonism? Because I think it kind of sounds familiar. So maybe this doesn't need to happen, and maybe you're actually colonizing in this new kind of way by saying, I know the truth. All right. Nobody's shouting at me or throwing anything at me yet, so this is good. All right, so service and making the world better. I said already that these slides will have relationship to each other. So I feel like one of the things that comes up when I'm talking to Mormons, but also when I'm talking to anybody on the planet, they're like, so now that you're not Mormon anymore, what do you do to serve the planet? I know that there are ex-Mormons who have very specific goals. Their goal is to change the church or to help LGBT people leave the church, or can be a specific goal. But for the rest of us who don't have a specific platform or specific cause that is driving us, I think nonetheless we spend time wandering around thinking, am I a bad person if I don't spend 10% of my money giving it to other people so that they can somehow have better lives? Or am I a bad person because I spend Sunday, I don't spend Sunday relaxing. I spend Sunday working 12 hours of overtime. But some of you might spend Sunday doing something fun, and you might feel guilty about it. Not because you're drinking coffee, right? But because you no longer are teaching the sunbeams. You no longer have a calling with the Scouts. And so we have this desire about serving, right? So I feel like a lot of the time, again, this is me, might be you, but it's definitely me. I spend a lot of time making up new rules about what good service is, not the bad service that I used to do as a Mormon, because God forbid that I would do that again. But I'm trying to figure out what good service is. And I'm going to admit, there's a temptation for me to be like, everything I did in Mormonism that I thought was good service then, of course, was terrible. So I have to do exactly the opposite. So, I can't go serve food at a food kitchen if that was what Mormons did, because that is bad, so I have to think of something else to do. Here's a real example. I remember when I was Mormon, there was a lot of Eagle Scout projects that we were asked to participate in, right? And I don't know why. Maybe this was an easy Eagle Scout project, but many, many, many times we were asked to go down to our food storage room, find some cans, and then donate them to the food bank. Now, nobody ever said to me when they asked me to do this, could you please check your cans and make sure that they have not expired? Nor did I ever hear anybody say something like, beets that your children don't like and that you haven't opened for the last 6 years might not be the thing that you want to send to the food kitchen. Here are some things that the food pantry would prefer to have. I don't remember any of those things. Maybe other people's words did a better job than mine did. They were just like, we need X number of cans, because my goal as the Eagle Scout project is to get 6,000 cans, and it doesn't matter if they're expired, because it doesn't matter if I'm actually helping the food pantry. It only matters if I meet this goal and get my Eagle Scout project finished. So I find myself, whenever I get a notice saying that somebody is collecting cans, I have this deep visceral sense of, I'm not goddamn giving you any cans. If you come to my door, I will give you some cash. That's the only thing I'm going to give you, because every time I talk to people who work at the food pantry, they are like, here, we got another 6,000 cans. Then we had to spend 10 hours sorting through the cans, sorting out the ones who are, terrible, and then the rest. Like, if people would just give us 50 cents instead of their 6 cans, it would go a lot further. So, anyway, you can feel that I have feelings about this. So I struggle to try to figure out, what is service? Like, what kind of service do I want to do? And then when I say to myself, okay, I'm just going to give money, then I'm like, but is that just the easy way out? Because Mormonism is all about boots on the ground and like meeting people where they are and like making relationships. Or is it about that? I don't even know if that's what it's about anymore. But I feel like I'm cheating sometimes if I just give, $10 to the homeless shelter. Am I allowed to give cash to homeless people? Because, when I was within Mormonism, there was always this constant question of the quote from the Book of Mormon that says that if you don't help somebody who asks you for help, then you're making a judgment on them and God will be angry with you. And yet, at the same time, there was also, I felt, a strong pressure not to give any money to homeless people. And if you go out and look on the street where many homeless people are asking for money, there are signs up that say homeless people are not allowed to be given money here, and if you give money through the window of your car, then that's considered a felony of some kind. No, it's not a felony, but they ask you not to do that. So what is service? And just like if you were at my talk yesterday, I'm throwing out questions because I don't have any answers. And actually, I've come to the space where I don't think anybody has any answers, so I just throw questions out at you. Why do you think that the world needs you? Like, this is another thing. We grow up in Mormonism, and we have this idea of like, we matter. God sent us we have a mission, and we have a purpose. There are people we're sent to save, right? And when you lose that, like, who are you now? You're just like random accident of genes that happen to go together at one particular moment, and like, you're just taking up space. Why are you here? Sometimes I think we need to believe that we're needed, but I don't know if the world really needs us. It seems to me a delusion and arrogance, and it's a very Mormon arrogance to think that the world needs you. Perhaps you should sit back and just listen to the world for a while, and maybe you should ask yourself this: what are you getting from the service you give, and why do you need that? Again, I'm talking about this giant hole. When you step away from Mormonism, there's this giant hole inside of yourself, and we just keep trying to fill that hole. And a lot of the time, we fill it with stuff that's familiar, but the opposite. All right, here's another thing that we do. I talked about missionarying before, right? I feel like we ex-Mormons often evangelize. We are so desperate to save Mormons from the cult. It feels like we have a bunch of missionary tactics going on. Now, I'm going to admit right now we don't have an MTC, okay? Good for us. We do not have an MTC, and we do not do the cult kind of things that the MTC does. Yes, maybe we are better than Mormons in that sense. See how I need to make us better? Like, even this need to have this hierarchy is so Mormon. But one of the things that we're doing when we go on missions, in this larger sense, not the MTC sense, is we make ourselves feel better. I mean, that is a huge part of the mission, is the sense that, again, I have a purpose in life, I matter, and we ex-Mormons are doing that again. Let me just say, new books are being written. I'm going to bring this up again later. Books about the experience of leaving Mormonism are not so very different in some really startling ways from books about joining Mormonism, or, just go and read some. Okay, new conference talks, I feel like, are being recorded regularly. I mean, if you listen to podcasts, you know what I am talking about. There are conference talks that are being spoken about topics that matter to the ex-Mormon community. We choose these topics, and then we all sit around. You know what the Mormons do, right? We all laugh about this. They have General Conference Sunday, and after they go to the priesthood session or the women's session or whatever, then they all go out to lunch or dinner together, right? And they chat about all the things that they learned. Are you doing that? Because we are doing that. Are we not doing that? We go out to coffee instead the next day, and we're like, did you hear that podcast? And like, that was so great, and I love that one part where they said, like, okay, so I admit again, we probably aren't getting out our crafting, and we're not like doing a cross stitch with a quote from any of the podcasts. I give us that. Does that make us better? I really don't think it does, my friends. I don't. And we have this new high. We love this new community that we're in, and we feed on each other, saying, yes, now we know the truth. Okay, if you haven't heard me talk about this before, then I talk about it a lot. I am not happier now that I am an ex-Mormon. I get really frustrated when I hear other ex-Mormons say, everybody who leaves Mormonism is happier on the other side. I am not happier. I am not. Maybe that's because I'm in the middle of a crappy divorce, or maybe it's because I don't feel the need to proselytize my leaving Mormonism in the way that Mormons do. Like the plan of happiness, my friends. Are we not doing the same thing when we talk about how happy we are? And I feel there is enormous pressure from the ex-Mormon community for me to like give my testimony of how much happier I am, and because I make ex-Mormonism look bad if I talk about how hard it is to be an ex-Mormon. Do you not see how that loyalty to an institution is exactly the same? Like, we're replicating it in the same way. I refuse to feel a loyalty to ex-Mormonism. I refuse to proclaim how happy I am as an ex-Mormon just so that we can like look better to Mormons. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's a little game that people are playing, and I'm not participating in it. Like, here's the reality. Sometimes I am sad. Sometimes I am angry. It is not always about Mormonism. Just like, you have feelings that are unrelated to the religion or community that you are part of. And that is why you are not going to be happy all the time if you are ex-Mormon, because you are a human being, and human beings are not happy all the time, just like you weren't happy all the time as a Mormon. No matter how many times people talked about the plan of happiness, and no matter how many times at church you felt pressure to stand up and give your testimony and talk about how grateful you are for some crappy thing that happened to you that you weren't grateful for, but you had to say that about. Okay. All right, this was part of my thing last year that I got in trouble for, but I do believe that there's a new word of wisdom, okay? I am poking fun of this as somebody who's participating in this new word of wisdom, right? Like, tea is so healthy for you. I proselytize tea, not coffee. Like, tea is so healthy for you. No sugar, you just put tea in, it's delicious. I have lots of different kinds of tea. If you come and look at my house, I have like 18 different flavors of tea. Some have caffeine, some are not caffeinated. I always have cold tea in the fridge. I have hot tea for breakfast every day. I get hydrated, and I get caffeine, and can start work at 6 a.m. It is just a drink. It has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't make your life better. It's just a drink. Like, I feel this need to like fight back against the idea that drinking tea or coffee will make your life so much better, in the same way that Mormons go around and tell people that not drinking coffee and tea is going to make your life so much better, or not drinking alcohol is going to make your life better. You are going to be who you are, no matter what you drink. Now, okay, alcohol may have specific problems. Coffee may or may not work for you. Coffee makes me a little jittery. That's why I drink tea. But please, let us make personal choices about our lives now, and not have this communal pressure to proclaim coffee is good for us. If you just drink alcohol, then you'll feel happier about your life. I don't. I've tried alcohol. I think it is disgusting. Yes, I know that I probably have not tried to get used to it. I don't see why I should. I don't care. You can drink alcohol. Why does there need to be a moral judgment on one side or the other? That's why I'm just saying, I feel like we're doing the same thing. I see a lot of ex-Mormons joining some keto or vegan bandwagon. Let me tell you, I know that. I was a vegan, a Whole Foods, like super anal vegan for about 6 years, while I was also following the word of wisdom, because I had to have a stricter diet and make myself more miserable than everybody else, because that would prove I was more righteous, right? So, like, let's just not do that. I don't like hearing people lose weight when they leave Mormonism, okay? There are certain people online who I love, but I don't want to hear the story about how you lose weight. And here's why. Because we have a massive problem in our society of fat stigma. And I would really prefer that we not contribute to fat stigma by talking about how weight loss is a metaphor for being happier. Okay, so please don't do that. Also, I know that some women have problems wearing garments and getting yeast infections. Okay, that's true, but I don't know, do we have to talk, is that the only thing about garments that's bad? I just want to have a different conversation than, doing this will save your life. Being ex-Mormon is so much better. If you stop wearing garments, then you'll be healthier and lose weight. I don't know. I don't think that's true. It's just clothing. If I buy a different brand of bra, then I might really like that brand of bra. But I'm not going to go around and tell everybody, you should wear this brand of bra because it's going to fix your boobs. It just only fixes my boobs. It might fix some other people's boobs, or it might not. All right, follow the money. I've written about this. My intro talked a little bit about, I used to write stuff on Medium that was controversial, and I don't do that anymore. But if you're interested, you can go and read an article that I wrote about, I feel the specific disadvantages of being an ex-Mormon woman financially. Because being out of the workforce for a long time means that my financial life sucks and I can never catch up. And I don't feel like that's something that's talked about enough within ex-Mormonism. I don't feel like we talk about how to remedy that. And part of that is because the people who are in control of certain power structures maybe don't have an interest in diverting money to ex-Mormon women. I don't know. All right, I'm going to go past that slide because I don't want to get in trouble. If you read it, please don't tell anybody about it. I do feel like sometimes in ex-Mormonism we use marginalized people for props. And let me just explain what I mean by this. So I already said, one of the major reasons that I left Mormonism is because of the policy of exclusion. But let me just remind you of how when you used to watch General Conference, how the cameras would always focus on the 2 black people in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, repeatedly, so that people who didn't know the reality might think that there were 15 black people in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Now, I don't know how many there are right now, but because it's been a long time since I watched. But the church tokenizes people in this way, and they'll do photo shoots and ask specifically for certain kinds of people to go to the photo shoots, even if they're not Mormon, because they want to present a certain image. And sometimes I fear that we are doing the same thing in ex-Mormonism by congratulating ourselves for our enlightenment about LGBT issues and inviting people to speak about LGBT issues who are LGBT or who are people of color or any other marginalized group. And then I think we sometimes are not compensating them for this marginalization. It feels sometimes like we use them and discard them. So I'm just going to ask you to watch and see if you feel like that's happening. Either speak up or maybe do something about it. It feels sometimes like we're re-traumatizing people by asking them to share their stories, and then it makes us feel better about ourselves, and then that's all that happens. Again, this is me. I'm pointing the finger at me. I have terrible us and them thinking, us versus them thinking. I always talk about Mormons thinking about when I was Mormon, I would always talk about Mormons thinking, I would always think about ex-Mormons as the bad guys, right? Those are the bad guys. They're trying to destroy the church. We Mormons, we're why can't they leave the church alone? I believed that for so long. But sometimes it feels like we are doing the same thing when we talk about Mormons, that we think of ourselves as superior to them. And we even do this, I think, in a damaging way. And again, when I say we, I mean me. Perhaps it's useful for you, perhaps it isn't. But I think it is damaging for me to think of myself as my past self, as deluded, as selfish, as wrong. Now, I'm not saying that those things aren't true. I probably was deluded and wrong and selfish. But harping on it over and over again can be damaging to moving forward and becoming the person that I want to be today. I think that you can say, I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon, and also offer yourself some grace for your past self. And while you're offering yourself some grace, maybe we can also offer other Mormons some grace. So, I think, in particular for me, again, this is for me, maybe it's true for you also, it is hard for me to see certain people at the top of the Mormon church as fully human. I'm so angry sometimes and feel like there's so much damage being done. It's hard for me to see them as human. And when I see myself reacting to something that they said in a dismissive way, in a like, what else did you expect? Or like, that's exactly who he is. I think that that is this us versus them thinking, and I think it's dangerous. And I think it really makes us into the thing that we say that we want to move away from. Okay, sex and sex cults. So this is just, someday I'm going to write a book about about Linda Walheim and Kurt getting invited to a group of Mormon swingers. So I know the Mormon church likes to think that we are not part of a sex cult anymore, right? We never were, sorry. That word would never be used within Mormonism, right? But sometimes I feel like you step outside of Mormonism and we start talking about sex in this different way, and sometimes I think it's really healthy, and other times I'm like, and maybe this is really Mormon of me to be judgmental about polyamorous people. I don't know. All I know is that I feel weird thinking about ex-Mormonism being a sex cult. Like, are we just finding ways to, like, hook up? Is that all ex-Mormonism is? Because I hope that that's not all that it is. And not that sex is bad. See, I can tell I am so Mormon just talking about this. So, whatever. Moving on. Me. I feel like one of the things that I look back on Mormonism, the way I lived Mormonism, it was all about me. Like, that it's a religion that's supposed to be about service and about eternal families, but it is often lived in a very selfish, self-obsessed way. That everything that you choose to do is about you getting into the kingdom. And your children, am I making something's so we talk when you're Mormon, you talk about having an eternal family, and you pretend when you're Mormon that it's about loving your eternal family and wanting that you're serving other people. But sometimes, maybe often, I'm afraid that within Mormonism, it's really selfishness. It's about, I need to have an eternal family so that I can make sure that I get into heaven. And so then I have to make sure my kids do what they're supposed to do so that I get, okay, I'm going to admit, I call this, perhaps in a rude way, the MLM points of Mormonism, right? Like, I have to make sure my children and my grandchildren all do the right thing because I get points for that. And, like, doesn't the Doctrine and Covenants say that, like, literally? Like, you get points for every person you baptize into the kingdom of heaven. It might not be points, but nonetheless, I'm going to argue it's an MLM. But I think it can feed the selfishness that everything is really about you. And the idea of becoming a better person, it's all about you. The atonement, all about you. What if it's not about you? What if it had nothing to do with you? How would ex-Mormonism look if we were able to accept that no one cares about you? You don't matter on the planet. You are an accident. The planet doesn't need you. The universe doesn't need you. I mean, maybe that makes you suicidal, and I admit, I think for a while it made me suicidal when I sort of accepted that I mattered not at all to anybody, like, in any real way. But also, on the other side of it, I think you can come to an acceptance of it's actually really freeing for it not to be about you. And there's a lot less pressure. And you can let go of this idea of service and, like, doing good for other people if you don't matter. And that can be a really good thing. Okay. I talked about this a little bit before, our superiority complex, how we sometimes, like, pity Mormons because they're still stuck in our old way of life that we used to believe in. This is something I find myself thinking all of the time, okay? I still listen to the people on the edge of Mormonism, the liberals who are still struggling. And I find myself saying sometimes, they're on their way out. And I make a little chart. Sometimes I make a little prediction, right? They're 2 months out. They're 2 years out, right? Do you find yourself doing that? I think it's a really Mormon thing. to end up doing that, because it's judgmental, and it's also this assumption that everybody must follow the same path as you, right? The plan of happiness. The plan of happiness is robots in lockstep, right? It's Stepford Wives, that everybody has the same exact plan. It turns out that that's not really true, and I'm trying to lean into that more, and that just because it was right for me to leave Mormonism doesn't mean that it's right for other people to leave Mormonism. And I don't need to be judgmental about it, and I don't need to wander around and say, you're not really an ally. You can't be an ally in the church because I had to leave. And so if you're still in the church and you're still trying to make things better for people in the church, you're still colluding with the church. Okay, I hear people talking about that. It feels very Mormon. It feels really Mormon to me. It's us and them thinking. It's very black and white. And it's all about who's better. I feel like we minimize the good Mormonism does in the world because it makes us feel better about ourselves. It's like, if Mormons are doing good stuff, then we left a place where there was good. When we talk about people who stay in the church for social reasons, what is it that we're saying about ourselves? I mean, do we say that because we can't believe that we stayed for any reasons other than social reasons? I don't know. It seems, again, like we're doing a lot of black and white thinking here. Okay, this is a slide from an admitted control addict. I desperately want to control everything and everyone, mostly because I have terrible, terrible anxiety, and I want a schedule. And I realized that at my job, for many years, I was frustrated with my job as a writer, because as a writer, you spend hours and years creating a book, and there's no way for you to know if you're doing a good job, right? Like, sure, you can get reviews, sure, you get money, but that doesn't really tell you whether the book was good or not, because actually there's no universal standard of good writing. But at my current job, I wake up every morning at 9 o'clock and I push a button. And when I push that button, it tells me how good of a job I'm doing. And it changes every day, and I look at it every day. I have it up on my screen. It tells me calls per hour. It tells me my schedule efficiency. It tells me my survey results from customers. And please, by the way, if you call into a call center and somebody gives you a survey, please answer the survey and give whoever talked to you however many stars you can give them, because they get paid based on that. Okay, so I am a control addict. I love numbers. And I want to control other people, their reactions to us, and their judgments of us. So when I sit and talk to other ex-Mormons about how Mormons think about us, right? It's very distressing when we think about our family members who are trying to get us back into the church, or who won't have relationships with us, or who invite us to events that we don't really believe in. All of these difficult things that we're trying to negotiate. One of the reasons it's so hard is because we're still trying to control them. In the exact same way that as Mormons we wanted to control other people, we're still trying to control other people. If we are really capable of not controlling other people, and I'm going to admit I am not capable of not wanting to control other people yet. I'm working on it. But I think if we could let go, needing to have other people think about us in a certain way, that I think, now I'm not going to say we're going to be happier, but I think your life might be easier. I don't promise happiness. Okay. I think there are a lot of new Bibles out there. Within the ex-Mormon community, people recommend a lot of books, mostly written by men, mostly by white men, but not entirely by white men. And every once in a while, Brene Brown will pop up in there. I think she's an honorary man. Just, if you're looking for Bibles, maybe stretch yourself. Look for Bibles that might not be written by the same people who wrote the original Bible. Just a thought. Okay, and then I hear a lot of ex-Mormons say that they believe in science now. And when I say to people, I don't believe in science, they automatically think that what I mean is I'm not vaccinated. I am vaccinated. Okay, I believe in science on that level. When I say I don't believe in science, what I mean is that the structure of science is dominated by white male people, okay? And the money in science goes to the white male people, and the structures are hierarchical. They are negative towards women, people of color, other marginalized groups. And so when you tell me that you now believe in science instead of Mormonism, I don't trust you. I do not believe in science in that way. Like I say, I'm vaccinated. I believe in science in that way. I do believe that science is one of the best tools that we have to finding whatever truth exists out there, whatever reality, which I think that we can never know, but it's our best shot at it. But I don't believe in science as an institution, as a structure, okay? I am deeply troubled by science as a structure. And also, I am concerned about who ex-Mormons are worshiping now. Again, the Bibles, to me, sometimes feel like we're worshiping a new set of people. I'm going to just admit here, one of my problems when I left Mormonism was that I had become so sick of authority over me that I find it very difficult to read any book at all, like nonfiction. I'm fine with fiction. But I struggle with nonfiction because I don't want other people to tell me the truth ever again. I would rather stumble around trying to figure it out on my own than to listen to somebody else, even if it's going to save me 3 years. Because I want to find out my truth. I want to find out what works for me. And I'm not convinced anymore that I'm enough like other people that what they have to say is useful. And I know that that sounds so crazy. Like, why? Why can't I read books? Why can't I trust other people to have truth? It's a reaction to Mormonism. And it's me flip-flopping. It's this flip-flop that I see in other ex-Mormons doing in other ways. This is my flip-flop. I flip-flop from trusting everything that the brethren say to I can't trust anything anybody says ever. I really struggle to trust people. Okay, I already talked about experts in authority. Let me just touch on this last one. This idea that you are rational now that you've left Mormonism is shit. Like, you are not rational now that you left Mormonism. You are no more rational than you were before you left Mormonism, and you're no more rational than anybody else. We make choices based on emotional drivers, okay? You're human. You're just like everybody else. That's the way we work. That's not me saying that Joseph Smith actually translated gold plates to you. I'm not going to try to make that argument. But I just don't think that this idea that we are now rational stands up. So if you can't accept that you're just as irrational as Mormons are, then I don't know where to go from there. Okay, let's do this slide very, very quickly. I do feel like there are some charismatic white cis leaders of ex-Mormonism, and I'm not naming any names because I don't want to get in trouble, and I will probably already get in way too much trouble for this. But I do feel like we're looking for new leaders, and we look for the same kinds of leaders that we had before. We look for white men in suits. And I think that's dangerous. Okay, becoming gods. If you say that you've given up on the idea of becoming a god in the next life, you mean that literally, right? But I also feel like what happens within ex-Mormonism is that we decide that we want to become gods in this life. And honestly, that's very Mormon. I think that that's what Mormons also do, because being a god in the next life is kind of a long wait. Right? And also, as Arthur Conan Doyle found out when he died, and he had promised that he would come back and tell his friends that he was on the other side with a particular way of knocking at the door, I think, when they buried him. That didn't happen. So I think even people who say they believe in life after death are really quite deeply uncertain about what that means. And so it's very tempting when you leave Mormonism and you give up any hope of rewards in heaven or being with your family forever. It's very tempting to want all of those rewards right now. Financial rewards, power rewards, people appreciating you. And again, this is me talking about myself. Why am I a writer? I think I'm a writer because I want people to look up to me. On some level, I have a deep need for adulation. And I am trying to grapple with that right now myself because I don't normally think of myself as somebody who likes attention. I really, really wish that you could all turn away and look the other way while I gave this talk. I don't like eye contact. I struggle with that. I was diagnosed with autism some years ago, and I struggle with this kind of attention. But I want to have this idea that I'm making the world a better place, and that is a kind of being a god. I want this, I talked about this before, this rescuing, this Messiah complex that I think that we have within Mormonism. I think we bring it with us outside of Mormonism. I like to have followers. I like people to say nice things to me. Does that mean I'm trying to become a god? Maybe it wouldn't if I hadn't already been Mormon. I think other people can do things, and it doesn't mean they're trying to become gods, and yet, as an ex-Mormon, I feel like it still becomes that. Or maybe it's just I'm so messed up for Mormonism that, everything looks like it's still Mormonism. I'm perfectly willing to grant that. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself. Do you offer advice to people without being asked? That is kind of a Mormon thing to do, right? I mean, think of the missionaries walking around asking people, like, do you know where you came from? Do you have a purpose in life, right? I mean, are we still asking those kinds of questions of other people? And are you certain that your choices are the right one and that everybody else should choose your same choice? Again, this feels super Mormon to me. And let me just say that this is coming from somebody who, I'm a recovering control addict, and I really struggle to not tell other people what they should be doing with their lives because, of course, when I was a teenager in my early 20s, I genuinely felt like I had conquered the world. I graduated from BYU at age 19 with a master's and a bachelor's degree, and I was an Ezra Taft Benson scholar, and I got a full-ride scholarship to start a PhD program at Princeton. And if you had asked me about anything in the world, like, what do you think I should do about this? I would have told you, essentially, well, you should just be like me. You should study like I do. You should sleep like I do. You should eat like I do. Because I clearly have had all this success in my life, and I kept thinking that other people should just be like me because I didn't have their problems, so you should just be like me. And I recognize this now as a really limited point of view, and it was definitely colored by Mormonism. Mormonism encouraged me to think of the world in that way, that if I didn't have that problem, it was because I was Mormon. It was because I made better choices. So maybe we can let go of the idea that our choices are giving us a better life and that other people should follow our choices. Okay, so eternal families, this is a giant problem. Now that you've given up the idea of eternal families, no empty chairs, my father-in-law used to say that all the time, being tied to your biological progeny in the next life, what do you do with your family relationships inside and outside Mormonism? And I know that for a lot of us, it feels like there's no right answer. There's nothing we can do to fix the problems that happen when you leave Mormonism. And so I come from a family of 11 children. My parents raised us super Orthodox. I don't know. Orthodox seems like the wrong word. We were crazy righteous Mormons. That's probably a better way of describing the way my parents raised us. I think my parents believed that being poor and hungry meant that we were righteous. Certainly they believed that wearing hand-me-down clothing made us more righteous. They would never buy us new clothes. None of us ever had new clothes until we were teenagers and we could get a job and buy our own clothes. They made sure we never drank any caffeine. And my dad would always say, avoid the appearance of evil, which to him meant that you couldn't have rum flavoring in the house. And he would lecture you if you brought home a bottle of Martinelli's to celebrate with, because why do you want to look like you're drinking alcohol? That is wrong. So I was raised in that kind of family, and now that I've stepped away from the church, I don't know how to have relationships with those people anymore. It's a problem. And yet, it feels to me like my family relationships are still the most important ones in my life. And my talk that I gave yesterday, I talked about, I still think that being a mom is the most important role that I have in my life. I still think that my relationships with my kids are the most important things in my life. I still think that my job as a mom is to watch for oncoming trains and throw myself in front of them for my kids. And maybe that's partly because American culture teaches me also that I should do that. But the whole eternal family things, I don't know how to give that up. And being so sad and frustrated that I can't have the same relationships with my family members now that I've stepped away from Mormonism that I used to have feels very Mormon to me. I remember years ago, I talked to my agent at the time, who was a secular Jew, and he just didn't understand why I cared. He's like, I see my mom once a year, and then I don't ever have to talk to her the rest of the year, because she is like a raging conservative idiot. I don't want to have a relationship with her. And so the whole idea of eternal families was something he thought was just messed up and made up in Mormonism. And so I think when I talk to people like that about how I feel so lost, not being part of my big Mormon family anymore, they're just like, well, the rest of us, nobody else expects that. Outside of Mormonism, you don't expect your family to be the closest people in your life. So is that something that I'm carrying with me? Do I give that up? And I don't know how, if I'm supposed to. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that one. This one is, I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to open up for questions. So I'll just go through the rest of these quickly. I do feel like we, as ex-Mormons, make our new Satans. I feel like sometimes we talk about Joseph Smith as the new Satan, Brigham Young as the new Satan, Boyd K. Packer was the Satan, David Bednar is now the Satan, or Dallin Oaks or Russell M. Nelson is the Satan of ex-Mormonism. And I tell you this in part because whenever I see a photo of Russell M. Nelson on Facebook or online or in the newspaper, I have a visceral reaction of ooh, just like I think I would if I saw a literal photo of Satan. And I think that is a problem. Why am I doing that? I don't know. Again, it makes me wonder if we need someone to fight. I wrote an essay years ago while I was still trying to stay in Mormonism about how I felt like we don't need Satan anymore. We don't need to have this idea that somebody tempts you into doing evil, because we should know by now that humans are perfectly capable of doing evil all on their own. And I do feel like this creating a new Satan out of the leadership of the Mormon Church is partly driven by our desire to make Mormons all good and make it all the fault of the leadership. And I think that is a false binary, like I started with, the false binary. So I feel like another thing that we do that's very Mormon is we do confessions, right? I mean, we used to confess to our bishops about all of our sins, right? Now I feel like we do confessions in group sessions where we confess about all the terrible things that we did as a Mormon. I don't know. Is that a great thing to do? And I think we are also building false new communities. Sometimes a certain podcaster will say something like, I wish we could just have Mormonism and have the road shows and all the good stuff of Mormonism, but not the other bad parts of Mormonism. And there's a part of me that's like, yeah, no. We shouldn't be wishing that. Because the kinds of communities that are built based on those things are suspect. At least they are to me, and maybe this is just me being super suspicious. I admit I'm damaged, and I don't trust anybody right now in the situation that I'm in. I have 9 people on my list. I count them every night. I trust 9 people. That's it. I don't trust other people. I say sometimes online, I don't trust anybody, and people will be like, but we love you. And I'm like, great, that's a lie. I know that you lie. People lie. That's Mormons lie all the time when they say that they love you. So I know you're lying, and that's fine because that's how social interaction works. But I just don't trust other people. And that's partly because of Mormonism. But am I just flip-flopping again? So anyway, this is my question for all of you. Can you start to become more aware of the ways in which you're just flip-flopping everything and making more ex-Mormonism just the reverse? What is it? Do you remember the old Star Trek episode where they had the guy who had black on one side of his face and white on the other, and then the reverse? And we, as the enlightened audience watching the show, could tell that those two people who claimed that they were different races and that they could never have anything in common, that they were exactly the same. How can you not see how much the same you are? That's how I feel like we should view Mormons and ex-Mormons. We are the same. We are really the same group of people. Okay, so I'm going to be done now, and I'll open up for questions. But be nice.
Thank you so much. Okay, if any of you here have questions, yeah, that would be great. If you can come up, speak clearly into the mic.
Thank you very much for these thoughts. I've often felt that way, and I'm still an active Mormon, but am equally annoyed by active Mormons and many ex-Mormons. So,
Mormons always like it when I talk shit about ex-Mormons. Just FYI, sorry.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'll own it. But what I also wanted to just throw out there and take it for what it's worth is like you seem to have identified a lot of aspects of just humanness generally. We're tribal by nature, and I think maybe that is partly what made us so successful evolutionarily, as well as maybe so annoying as well. I don't know. I'm curious as to what your thoughts might be about, to what extent you're just a misanthrope who just doesn't like humanity generally, and maybe that's okay not to like. Sometimes I feel that way too. So, anyway, just throwing that out there.
I mean, I do try to talk sometimes about, I think that motherhood it's difficult to separate what parts of motherhood are Mormon and what parts are cultural. And hierarchy, sexism, all exist not necessarily in the same flavor outside of Mormonism. But one of my strongest memories when I went to Princeton for the first time, so I'd been so excited to go to Princeton because it was like the liberal mecca, and I was going to have a totally different experience than I had at BYU. But when I went to Princeton, there were no tenured female profs. And the very first grad student talk that we had with the professors was like, why are there no tenured female profs? And I remember one of the professors said, in complete seriousness, there weren't any who had the qualifications to be, and I was like, on the planet? Like, what? How can you say that with a straight face? But he was utterly certain that that was true. And during the time period that I was there, all three of the women who were assistant profs left the university because they were treated badly by the male professors who were there, and were pretty open about it. And so I had this revelation about Mormon sexism is bad, and also Princeton sexism is bad, and they have different flavors, and I hate them both. And that's one of the reasons why, I use the Princeton name, but I am I have a very difficult relationship with having gone to Princeton because, it's useful to have that name and throw it around. People think that it's super impressive, but it was a terrible experience as a woman to go to that school. They treated me terribly. So yes. And then my second response is, I already said I'm autistic. I do think that one of the realities of being autistic is that I'm not social in the way that people think is human. And sometimes I get frustrated when I'm like, when you call that human, then I'm like, does that mean I'm not human? I don't know. I'm not sure what to say about the humanness of needing social connection in the way in which I don't think I need it. But because I am distant from these social connections, I do think that I am capable of giving you, the rest of you, information about what you are doing that is clear to me what your motivations are when it's not clear to you. So take it for what it's worth.
Hi there, my name is Holly, and I identify myself as agnostic post-Mormon. I kind of hate to use the term ex-Mormon because I feel that that's denying some of the good aspects of Mormonism. And I was wondering what your opinion is, if you think, because I love these questions, because these are things that I struggle with a lot as I separate myself from the teachings of the church and the practices and the culture of the church. And I really worry how much I impose the same culture, because I've grown up my entire life Mormon, and very Orthodox Mormon in many ways. But I'm wondering if some of these questions and these concerns are also just a reaction, or, they're very reactionary and almost fear-based out of the need to deprogram. And maybe and I'm not saying you personally, I'm just saying maybe you and me and all of us, that after a certain point of deprogramming, that we are able to add back certain things that we find good in Mormonism, and maybe even being able to find that point of acceptance, of looking for the good. I hate to use that term, but again, that's a very Mormon term as well. But finding that becomes the next step after reacting and trying to reject everything, to start saying, actually having a community, even if it's very superficial, is healthy. Or, maybe patriarchy isn't good. and we should have, allow everyone the same kind of role, but it's hard to find a way that you don't impose hierarchy into certain social structures. So anyway, I just wanted to hear your opinion on this.
Am I reactionary? Definitely. I think when I hear people who are further out than I am, I'm perfectly willing to accept that that might happen for me. I don't know if it will. But I will say I have this gut reaction to it, which is the same as when my daughter died, and people would tell me things like, later you'll be glad this happened to you, there's an important lesson for you to learn in this, or you're going to grow so much from this. I think that when you're in the midst of it, as we are, I think it's really important for us. Like, yes, maybe that'll be in the future, but it's important for us to own the feelings that we have now and just say, it's okay. It's okay to be reactionary. It's okay to have all of these questions. That's why I'm doing this presentation. It's less about me trying to get us to stop. I'm not trying to reform ex-Mormonism. What I'm trying to do is to get us to see ourselves more clearly, and I think that I have a perspective that, first of all, because of my autism, I just blurt out stuff that other people would be like, no, don't say that out loud. Why are you doing that? But also, I think also because I'm autistic, I see things in a certain way. I have a slant. I'm not going to say I see it more truly, but I have a slant that I think is useful in certain situations. And so I offer it as a perspective. And I also am offering to those of you who are in the midst of this, as I am, just I'm there with you. I'm asking these questions of myself. I am struggling with, how do you leave? Do I want to leave? What parts do I want to leave? I think it's important to say, that is this place that you are in, and that is a valid place to be in. You may move out of that place, but you don't have to, if that makes sense. Okay, we're done.
Thank you so much, and thank you for attending this session and supporting Sunstone. Thank you to our presenter.